All right. So welcome to our forum on getting a shade our streams and backyard habitat style program set up for the Scappoose Bay Watershed Council. We're looking to have a discussion today around what does it take to manage and operate and facilitate these kinds of programs. So as we're starting to look at which aspects fit well for our needs, and then starting to write grants and looking for funding for staffing and for implementation. We're hoping to get some feedback from Audubon and the Backyard Habitats program, as well as the Shade Our Streams program on some of the ways that you guys have had success and some of the things that you've learned from and said, well, maybe we don't need it to do it that way again. And so if we could just go around the room and introduce ourselves, that would be useful, I think, for everybody. And if we can have cameras on, that would also be helpful. So Barbara, would you like to introduce yourself since you're up there at my upper right-hand corner or left-hand corner?
Barbara White, I'm currently the treasurer.
With the Scappoose Bay Watershed Council. Yeah, I'm Nicole Ferreira with the Scappoose Bay Watershed Council and the current board president. Howard?
I'm Howard Blumenthal. I'm the vice chair of the Watershed Council, friend of Nob Hill Nature Park, and on the City of St. Helens Parks and Trails Commission. So local rabble rouser.
Thanks, Howard. Rochelle?
Hi, I'm Rochelle, and I am the current council coordinator here at the Scappoose Bay Watershed Council.
Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine Noble. I'm one of the program managers for the Backyard Habitat program on the Portland Audubon end.
JP?
JP Marchetti Mendez. I am the program coordinator for Backyard Habitat.
Alex? Monroy?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the resource manager at Scappoose Bay Watershed Council, and I run our little native nursery.
Micah?
Hello, hello.
Yeah, hey everyone. Micah Meskel. I'm the assistant conservation director for Portland Audubon with an urban program focus, of which the backyard habitat is a key component.
Excellent. Jim? You're probably hoping not to.
Hi, I'm Jim Brick. I'm with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife out of our Clackamas office.
Erin?
Hi, everybody. I'm Erin O'Connell, and I'm the Environmental Services Specialist with Columbia County Land Development Services. I have a dog. You can't see her, but she's standing right next to me, like wanting to be part of this conversation.
Amber?
Hi, I'm Amber Kester with the Columbia Soil and Water Conservation District. I am one of their resource conservationists.
Kevin?
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Nelson. I'm a stewardship forester out of Columbia City. I have replaced Mark Reed, who retired a few months back for the stewardship forester for Northern Columbia County. And I worked in Washington and Multnomah counties for many years. And so I was pretty acquainted with all the folks down there with those watershed councils and NRCS. And so really I'm just trying to become more acquainted with the movers and shakers and the folks that are working on these sorts of projects. Columbia County, and I of course do the forest practices enforcement on logging operations, and then I do a lot of landowner assistance and cooperation with soil and water and NRCS and stuff like that. So if you ever have any forestry questions, I'm the guy to go to now.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us today, Kevin. And I do see, like as part of our adaptation of the Backyards Habitat program, having farm, forest management, and other types of certifications that aren't necessarily applicable to the urban environment, but very applicable to Columbia County. So I think there'll be some conversations there as we go through and look at what this program looks like for us. Jenny?
Hi, yeah, sorry about that. You can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay, great. Jenny Dezzo from the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership. And I've worked here for about 7 years. But prior to that, I worked for the Clackamas River Basin Council, where I helped initiate a Shade Our Streams program there. So yeah, excited to hear Scappoose is interested in that kind of work and happy to help however I can.
Fantastic, thanks. Alex T.
Hi, I am Alex Tardif and I am on the council. Nice to meet you.
Dave.
Yeah, hi everyone. Dave Suka, Public Works Director for the City of Scappoose. I don't know how much good input I'll have for today's topic, but I'll try to listen in and see what's going on. Also have to break off at about a half hour, so if I
Sure.
get part, that's why.
Yeah, and I think that the city of Scappoose is a good partner for this type of a program because we're looking at how can we help address the mercury TMDL and temperature TMDL and those kinds of things. And so
We are definitely right in the heart of finishing up our mercury right as we speak. So yeah.
And not to put Amanda on the spot, but if you'd like to introduce yourself, Amanda.
Sorry, I'm in my dinner break for conferences. I'm Amanda Darlak, high school teacher at Scappoose High School. My former life, I was a field ornithologist, so love of being outside and everything wild. Trying to get kids involved, getting out of the classroom and getting, like, we've got hands, we can do some work. So wherever we can put high school students into hands-on experiences, I'm trying to create that more. So
Fantastic. Thanks. Enjoy your dinner. All right. So from here, Rochelle, did you have an agenda set up for us to kind of walk through, or do we want to do this organically?
I figured it would
open it
be
up.
pretty organically. I have some bullet points. So starting with kind of how a shader streams looks like, one of the first things that is probably going to need to be assessed is obviously our watershed with some sort of survey or analysis that could probably be done through GIS or some sort of system like that. I was going through some of Jenny's materials earlier today, and then just looking at how what that might look like, or see if we have any feedback from the group here on some suggestions for analysis for looking at, because if we can get an analysis of what shade is needed throughout the watershed, then we can also break it down by priority and target areas for landowners or properties that might need more trees or more shrubs or things planted along the streams. So it's kind of a first step, I feel like, in a program like this. And then where once there's that need and we can show that need, then it probably is a bit easier to get funding for something like that, but then also making a survey or analysis manageable from a small watershed council standpoint as well. Anybody have any thoughts?
I think some of the mapping that we're doing through the SIA with ODA would be very beneficial. We'll be getting a list of potential restoration properties, and I think we could probably narrow down, being the SIA is in your watershed and directly related to the streams you're looking to work on. I think we can use some of that and then build off of those fairly easily.
That's a great idea.
I'm kind of wondering, because we have the county web maps that we use that has a stream layer, and our most current aerial is a 2022, and sometimes it's a little hard to see because where it says the actual stream is, which shows up as, you know, like an actual color. Sometimes the vegetation doesn't totally match it, but you also can kind of tell where the stream probably is by the vegetation. But I'm kind of wondering if that would be a tool, where you could literally go through, you know, quarter section by quarter section and look at it. It kind of feels like it would be tedious. So I don't know. I could certainly ask our GIS analyst if there would be a way to maybe sort of hone in on that. But I mean, I use our aerials all the time for the work that I do, and like it's pretty easy to see just looking at it, you know, kind of where maybe things were. So I'm wondering if you would be able to pick out, like if you knew that's where the stream was, which should be indicated by that layer, and you could maybe make some assumptions of where it looked like the vegetation needed to be addressed. Just like I said, though, our most recent aerial is 2022, so it is actually a little bit lagging.
Well, 2002.
2022.
22. Okay. That vegetation, especially when you're talking about trees, that they're pretty slow growing, so that's not that far behind.
Yeah. So yeah, anyways, I'm happy to ask that question to see if they have any thoughts.
Yeah, well, and we have the access to the iTree Eco program, where you can do what my thought was to get all of our streams within the watershed and then do an offset on them. So we get a study boundary area, and then if we had a recent aerial that we could put under that, it's just a matter of going through and doing a survey analysis within that resource area through the iTree program. And it wouldn't be too hard to get to canopy coverage from there.
Yeah, and I'm not super, obviously I know how to use the program. I'm not super savvy at all the technical details, but like I'd certainly, if they were open to it, I'd be happy to put you know, Brittany in contact with you, Brittany Henderson in contact with you to like explore that idea.
Cool.
Because she's really great at stuff like that. And she always has tons of ideas, and she actually helped us on an LSET project that Jenny was involved with to do some mapping. So she has really great ideas.
Yeah, and with the iTree survey, we could potentially outsource that to the high school students, because it is a little bit like a video game where you're clicking and making decisions as to, you know, is this water, is this vegetation, is this a tree?
You know, one other thought, and this is probably a little bit antiquated. I'm trying to think when Trash did the limiting factor analysis, but he identified through there lots of areas that needed riparian vegetation. And so that might be partial of a tool that might be of interest of looking at where he identified that as a need. There was significant mileage in that.
That would be a great tool if we can get some mapping done, and then, you know, also matching it and pairing it up with the limiting factor analysis would be a great idea for, especially for funding.
Just another quick suggestion from what we did in the Clackamas. We definitely started with a shade assessment. We had AmeriCorps volunteers working on that. So yeah, we got some good, you know, kind of volunteer intern power to work on that. And then we also kind of started small and picked a pilot sub watershed to just kind of like get our feet wet and build in an area where we knew we would likely have interested landowners, so that we could kind of bite off a little manageable chunk. So you might consider where you already have some, we call them little mayors, little land and private landowners, riparian landowners that are interested and motivated. And then maybe that would kind of like get the ball rolling on the program as well.
Yeah, I can see the South Fork of the Scappoose Creek as being a good watershed to start that on, because we do have a number of willing landowners there, and City of Scappoose has a bit of land there as well. So when it comes to funding the Shade Our Streams program, did the individual landowners pay into it to buy the trees? Were the trees provided directly to them through a grant process? Or I know you had Portland General Electric was a primary sponsor of it.
Yeah, for the Clackamas Shade Our Streams program, it was pretty much completely funded by PGE. I think in the later years, maybe Clackamas SWCD has contributed some funding. But that was one of the big selling points that we had for private landowner engagement, was this is totally funded from, you know, technician review of the site and recommendations and kind of creating a plan, to having crews out on the site doing site prep, crews planting the plants, and then doing maintenance. So yeah, it was totally funded by PGE. We were pretty fortunate for that, yeah.
Now, you mentioned that the crews got out there and you had it designed, and then you had it planted, and then they maintained it. What was that maintenance period that they were out there for?
We set up a 3 to 5 year maintenance period. And so at most sites, I would definitely plan for a 3-year maintenance period. You know, a lot of the sites we were working with in the Clackamas, one of the reasons why they either, you know, if they weren't shaded already with native plants and they were filled with reed canary grass or blackberry, or Japanese knotweed, you know, some of the even worse ones that we prioritize for multiple years of site prep. So those were definitely like, how bad are the sites? You want to target the ones that aren't shaded, but then also those tend to be the ones with more invasive weeds that kind of take a little more effort and time to manage over the long term, to make sure that the native plants that you put in are successful, which is kind of, you know, one of the big challenges.
Mm-hmm. And did the program keep track of what the project costs were that PGE was covering, like dollar values?
Yeah, I don't remember, you know, what the like running acre rate is. You know, some publications that have worked in the kind of riparian restoration field, revegetation field, have quoted like 6,000 per acre. I feel like that's kind of low now. That was, you know, a number that was thrown out maybe 10 years ago. But yeah, I mean, the program overall was aiming to revegetate 5 stream miles a year, for, let's see how many, for a total of 30 stream miles. So it was 7 years. And I mean, we were running on a budget of a little over $1 million each year. I mean, it was a large scale program. I'm imagining that you guys would probably start something a little bit smaller initially, and then maybe grow it as, you know, different funders jump on board, to support this kind of program where it's needed in Scappoose. So yeah.
And when were you looking at plant material size for those trees? Are you talking like the tiny restoration size? Or are you occasionally putting in some larger, more mature-ish, like 4 to 8 foot tall trees to get that shade canopy sooner?
We were almost exclusively using bare root. So that would be the classes are like 12 to 24 inch or 24 to 36 inch. And we would usually not use anything under 12 inch, because we found that the success rate was so much lower with the competition. It couldn't outcompete the weeds that remained at the site. So we would typically specify with our plant source material that it would be greater than 24 inches. And there were certain species that, you know, we really wanted big. And so sometimes the crews would show up and they would have these giant maples, big leaf maples. And we were always excited about that, because it was just giving those plants a head start. I'd be curious to go back and see some of the sites. I don't know, Rochelle, if you were able to talk with anyone at CRBC and see how the monitoring is going for that program.
I reached out a couple of times and then finally got an email back from somebody, but I haven't been able to like set up a meeting yet. But
It would be really interesting because like I said, I kind of helped kick off the program and was there for the first, 5 years. But really the success of it is in the long term of, which sites succeeded or which techniques that they found were really cost effective in the long run for the program. So yeah, that would be cool. Someone at if they are strapped and not able to get back to you or something, I bet someone at Clackamas SWCD, Susie Cloutier there, she used to work at the Watershed Council and then moved to the SWCD. So she might still kind of have a pulse on that program as well.
That's very good information. You had brought up site prep a little bit. And I think that's something that we think about a little bit, but in these larger areas, how much site prep is really needed? Are we talking about just clearing, or is it should we be looking at a longer process to give these plants a better start so they can outcompete those, especially when we're talking about blackberry and canary reed grass, because it can come back so vigorously.
Yeah, we always did at least a year of site prep, which typically included 3 treatments. Sometimes it was a cut spray or spray, which I don't love the amount of herbicide that we were using in that watershed during that time. I think we've learned a lot about the, alternative ways. But yeah, I would definitely plan for when you're working in those unshaded high priority areas that you're going to be needing at least a year of site prep. And then depending on any, more aggressive weeds like Japanese knotweed. I'm trying to think if there's others that you guys might have in your basin that are particularly challenging. You might need more years. At least 2 for Japanese knotweed is what we would specify in the past. And then some sites, you might say, oh, we might not have success here. This should not be an early pilot site that we select, because you really want to select a site that you'll have a high success rate early on so that you can show the community and the funders, hey, look at how good we're doing this. We're very good at this. Like, let's keep doing it. Give us more money. We would have, we engage the landowners on, we would bring landowners to sites that we had completed. So it was important that those looked clean-ish, even though it's restoration. The landowners often wanted kind of a clean look to their riparian area.
And then following a little bit with that, when we're talking about site prep and then just the areas in general, I kind of wanted to hear the group's thoughts on maybe what a buffer should be. When we typically talk about the riparian buffer, we're talking about 50 feet, but I know that there's some science that says more, some science that says, we're landowners that might not want that much of their land dealt with. So what do good buffers look like for a program like this that we should be planting? Anyone have any thoughts?
Rachel, I think the science on it is a site potential tree, which is probably 100 to 150 feet. Now, you're probably not going to get that with most landowners, especially the small private ones. So I think anything is better than nothing. But the site potential tree is a thought. And then also the second thought on these fish bearing streams, The code within the cities and the counties, I think, is it a 50-foot no cut zone? So even if you get to 50 feet, that should be in theory not be able to cut down or build in the future. And so those are three different thoughts on that.
And we do have, we have in our zoning code riparian setbacks that are, I believe they are the 50 feet for the fish bearing streams. But we recently just had, some decisions made at the higher levels to change some of the language to actually reduce riparian setbacks in certain situations. And so maybe, some of the outcome of this is some of the long-term, I guess, implications of this, is that maybe some of the work, right, like sort of helps generate information about how you right size buffers, so that policy makers, decision makers can sort of consider that information. But yeah, that's probably, I mean, obviously, if we can make buffers bigger than that, that's not a bad thing. But we do have in the cities and the counties established code buffers.
In my experience, I would say generally a two overstory trees deep. It's just a general. I've seen a lot of NRCS and soil and water restoration stuff, and aside from understory, considering overstory, you need at least 2 rows of overstory for that buffer to hold up long term. And that's, considering beaver damage or failure, shade cast distance. 2 overstory trees tends to hold the buffer together really nicely, because you can have space for your understory still. But if there's losses, you still have something there. So generally, the planting designs I've seen that would work have, the very water tolerant, flood tolerant understory species up to a first row of an overstory tree mixed with understory veg, and then another overstory tree on the outside. And that could vary, minimum 25 feet to the sky's the limit. But yeah, somewhere around 50 foot is probably realistic.
And then in your experience, since you mentioned beavers, would we want to consider, some of our areas are pretty rural and we do have some beaver populations, including maybe beaver forage, in order for our riparian buffers to be, providing something for the beavers, but then we would be able to like maintain our actual plantings without there being too much damage.
No, they're not anything we want to encourage. They just exclusion. They can do so much damage so quickly that if it's an area with beavers already established, yeah, maybe then we got a horse fence all the trees, and then put some sacrificial vegetation out there. But in general, no, you don't want to encourage any sort of beaver activity. You just want to exclude them from the trees. And that's also why that two tree depth, at least 2, is important, because long term you might lose a lot of your vegetation, but if you can get 2 trees deep, that's permanent essentially. I've seen these projects. I've done a lot of the NRCS re-ups, at the 10-year and things like that. And one thing important to consider is that oftentimes the understory veg is transient. It can be constantly changing. It can be drastically affected by floods, by animals, by the cycle of our veg treatment, invasive treatments and stuff like that. Long term, it's the trees. And that has always been my take home message with every group I work with is we put a lot of energy into the understory, but long term it's trees. And every time you ask me, I'll hammer that home. Not only trees, but valley pine. I need to get a t-shirt that just says Valley Pine on it. Valley Pine is the answer, and wear it to every Zoom meeting. But I'm a forester, so you're always going to hear about trees.
So have you seen valley pine growing out here on its own in Columbia County?
It's not growing anywhere on its own. That it hasn't grown anywhere on its own in 150 years. So no, it's a reintroduction everywhere, but it'll thrive here. I've seen not as many plantations up here, but lots of just interspersed plantings, including my backyard.
I've included it in many of my plantings and it's thriving.
Thriving. Yeah.
It's good to hear. I've tried to include it in some of our larger projects for, I do industrial and commercial development, and it's been hard to find it at larger sizes. I think they're all mainly restoration size, and you can't get anything like, 2-inch caliper or 8-foot height.
Nope.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just the beginning. But the nice thing why I always try and sell it too is that it, unlike Doug fir, it doesn't completely eliminate all that work you spent on native understory. Because when you get the Doug fir mixed in there, where it can tolerate it, eventually the choice is Doug fir or anything else. One or the other, something has to go. And you don't run into that with the pine. The pine is coexists better.
All right. Well, another topic to talk about and why some of our other partners are here would be, one of the thoughts we had, and Nicole, you could probably speak more on this, was bringing in a backyard habitat component would be a way to incentivize landowners in order to maintain their property or incentivize them into planting, because then they would get those backyard habitat certificates and have maybe a little bit more incentive to maintain the space as well. Nicole, did you want to speak on that a little bit, and maybe we could get some of our partners' feedback on what starting or incorporating that would look like?
Yeah, so recently we had Columbia County rolled back their wetland protections. And so that was really one of the, for me, one of the driving factors in getting this program up and off the ground is to use it for education for landowners out here as to why it's important to protect our streams and how that applies to many, pretty much all aspects of our lives and our ability to live and thrive out here. And so once I started thinking about like, okay, we've got the different needs of our different community partners, and they all come back to some form of water quality. The Watershed Council can only do so much work. We're a limited group, but if we start getting community members involved, we can start to magnify and amplify the restoration that's happening. We have Soil and Water Conservation District that's very interested in pollinator habitat. We have a lot of our partners are very interested in fish habitat. Not everybody has a stream. So to make not everybody has a forest, not everybody has an urban house. And so my idea is to create different designations that farmers can use to certify their management of having pollinator hedges out there, or making sure that the runoff from their fields isn't creating E. coli conditions in the streams. So we've got some stream buffers there. We have maybe forest management, making, giving smaller landowners that don't necessarily managing, 50 acres, but maybe they've got a wooded buffer along their stream, and giving them the ability to recognize good management and understand how should they be managing it, giving them the tools for how can we approach our land in a holistic way that benefits the rest of the community as well. And all the way down to rain gardens and backyard habitats for, city of Scappoose and St. Helens, and maybe eventually like Rainier and Vernonia and other areas within the county that have houses that are packed a little tightly together. So that's kind of like a general direction that I'm heading with it. And it's a little bit, I think, broader than what we're seeing in Portland with the Backyards Habitat Program, but I think it's feasible.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting to hear, wanting to use a similar model. And just to share from our perspective, the way that we kind of talk about it too is that bringing participants into our program is a way to garner or to use them as volunteer habitat restorers. And it's also a way to get them excited about not only building actual habitat and seeing the changes on their own property or community space that comes with doing that restoration work, but also garnering support for these larger projects like your Shade the Stream project. I think it's a lot easier for folks to get on board with these larger projects that they're seeing happening in the community if they're seeing the changes happening on their own property. And so that's some of the spaces that we've come in into with our different funding partners, is to be kind of the educators and the outreachers of why we are suggesting and asking these different changes that then translate into them supporting larger like city or different municipality, or like, for example, your own project, and possibly a way for you to also get volunteers for doing some of these larger planting endeavors you have.
Yeah, so can you speak a little bit to how your program is set up? So I'm a landowner. I've heard my neighbor has a backyard habitat certification of gold. So they've been working on it for a little while, but they're not quite to the platinum level, and they're pulling me in and getting me excited about the program. What does that look like when I start reaching out to backyard habitats?
Are you asking kind of what the participant experience is?
Well, how does your I guess I'm looking for hierarchy of like how you staff things. Who are the volunteers? What do they do? Who, you've got one point of contact maybe that then distributes the work to other people that can go out there and do the certifications. How does that system work?
Yeah, I'll maybe start with just a quick overview of kind of the participant experience, and then I can talk about like who's coming into play at different points. So the way our program is set up is you enroll online. We have a sliding scale enrollment fee designed to accommodate people of all incomes. And then the first thing that happens is you receive a site visit that is about an hour long with a paid contractor that we call habitat technicians. And most of them come from backgrounds of like landscape design or permaculture or we have some people who have been arborists in the past, things like that. So they really have high level of professional expertise in this area, and they provide usually about an hour long site visit to give really specific directives of what a participant can do on their property, and then providing them with a written report afterwards. And then we do rely on our participants to do the work themselves. We try to mitigate different factors by offering coupons, by advertising plant sales, connecting them with local resources, things like that. But most of the work is done by the participant themselves and paid for by the participant. And then when our certification criteria you lightly mentioned is set up within 3 different tiers. With the design to be really like a framework of goals for people. And there are many people in the program who don't want to necessarily pursue certification, but they want kind of a guideline of like, what can I do to create habitat? And so it's set up in this iterative steps of silver, gold, and platinum to allow for like an easy entry point. And platinum honestly is sometimes unachievable depending on the piece of property you're working with. And people's finances and time and everything. And so when they feel like they have achieved a certain list of goals, that's when they get certification. And that's where we use our volunteers. So through Portland Audubon, we have about 80 to 120 active volunteers. Some of them are trained specifically on doing certification visits. So that's where we use our volunteers. To take a step back on like our team setup, we are a co-managed program through Portland Audubon and Columbia Land Trust. So that's why my title is co-manager. We have another manager over the Land Trust team. And we have a staff team of 5. Myself and Susie are the co-managers. JP, who's here, is one of our 2 program coordinators. And then we have a community partner coordinator as well. And so a lot of the like administrative tasks and like points of contact go through our community or our program coordinators. Our community coordinator is really focused on developing partnerships with local community organizations to reach a diverse group of participants, and also finding different ways that we can be beneficial in the community outside of like our strict certification criteria.
Excellent. JP, what is your experience with as being program coordinator? Can you speak a little bit to what your role does?
Yeah, so I've been with the program since 2017, and when I started, I was the only program coordinator and one of 3 staff. So in the beginning, I was processing the entire process of the participants from enrollment all the way to certification. But back then we were like 5,000 people, and now we're approaching 12,000 people in the program. So as our program grew, I became more of the end portion of the process. So I engage with our program participants once they tell us that they're ready to certify. And I am the one coordinating with volunteers, matching the volunteer with program participant that needs that visit. And I am also the person that finalizes the process and renewals, because the certifications are good for 3 years. Then people need to renew online. So that is also, I'm sending email reminders of people that are due to renew their certifications. So I am more on the back end of the process, and my counterpart in the Columbia Land Trust does the other portion, the initial portion of the certification process. So she processes all new applications and connect those participants with the technicians that would do the initial visit.
Yeah. So each time they initiate the certification process, they pay a fee. How much of that goes to support the operations of your program, and where are the other areas that your program is pulling in money and funding from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our enrollment fee really doesn't do a whole lot towards actually covering the costs, to be frank. So our suggested donation amount right now is $40. And as you can imagine, paying for a site visit, the materials of the signs that we offer for the yard. So we have 2 signs, an in progress sign that folks get at the start of the program, and then metal signs that people get if they're awarded certification. Along with everything else, $40 doesn't go anywhere near covering it all for one participant. We do have, like I said, we do have it on a sliding scale, and that's something I would strongly recommend folks starting out with the mindset of how can we be more accessible to folks. It's something we've done for a few years, and we've really seen an uptick of people doing like additional donations in this kind of pay it forward manner. And then we do have many people who come in at like a $5 mark or get it waived completely. But having it set up like that, things generally kind of even out to the $40. The majority of our funding comes through contracts that we have with different municipalities. That's largely speaking different cities. We have some with different counties. We also have done a lot of, we get a lot of support from our local soil water conservation districts. So we are in 4 different counties: Clark, Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah. So we work with like Tualatin Soil Water Conservation, East Multnomah, West Multnomah, all of those. And we also do have some grants. We have one right now through Metro, and are always kind of pursuing some other options. So the large majority of our funding does come through those avenues. We do have a couple of funding through, we do a lot of focus on like stormwater management. So we do have some funding with like Clean Water Services and other water management organizations. And then of course we have the support of our 2 organizations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I think that's been one of the challenges, is to figure out how do we find funding sources out here in the county to help facilitate. And I think that a good portion of this is going to have to be volunteer run in the initial phases. JP, you mentioned that at one point your staff was smaller not that long ago. And so when this program did start out, how many staff do you know how many staff there were running it? That might not be a question for JP, I'm not sure.
I was going to pass it to Micah. Go ahead, Micah.
Yeah. I think the arc of the program is an important sort of lesson in that it really got started almost, I think, 12 or 13 years ago, and really was focused on properties adjacent to a single natural area in Southwest Portland. And so there were a couple conservation groups that had been focused on restoring that natural area and its connected watersheds, and found that the work they were doing on that site was adjacent to all these private property owners. And so we're really kind of crafted this as a tool to work with those specific property owners. And so it got started just out of I think it was one staffer, and only part of their time from their other land trust responsibilities. And yeah, as the program has grown, so has the structure of the program. And so really thinking about how you all want to consider sort of the potential creation of such a program, I would really consider the like geographic extent of starting small and building momentum, experience, community understanding, and at that same time you're demonstrating the impact of it, and thus can start to have deeper conversations with potential funding partners, whether that's the city of Scappoose, whether that's Columbia County, whether that's the watershed, the Soil and Water Conservation District, whether it's other state resources. And as the program evolved, it evolved in those partnerships. So each of those agencies helped inform different aspects of the program, whether it was the focus on water quality, whether it was the focus on reducing pesticide use, whether if it was the focus on building wildlife habitat, whether it was, a whole slew of the different aspects of the program really came out of those partnerships. And so I think starting with the basics and sort of the basics that we've come up with, which are planting native species, removing non-native invasives, dealing with stormwater on site, building wildlife habitat, and reducing pesticide use is like a really good base. And then adjusting those to your local partnerships and the specificity of the goals that you're trying to reach.
That's great, thank you. Catherine, you had your hands up. Oh, Rochelle. Catherine, you had your hand up briefly.
I did. Micah kind of touched on what I was thinking I wanted to say. Just to reiterate the point about that, a lot of the specifics of our criteria were created in partnership with our future funders. And also just thinking about the different ways that you can identify, like Micah said, local needs, but also different like initiatives that different municipalities need to accomplish. For example, like we're written in under a lot of like different areas of people's budgets. Sometimes we're written in under outreach and education. Sometimes we're under like their DEQ goals. We're starting to get more into like climate resiliency goals as different cities are ramping up those programs. So just encouraging you to think creatively too about where you might fit in with other initiatives that are happening. And sometimes using that to develop your own criteria for if you're doing certification, for example. But even after that, how you can be creative in that.
Thank you. Rochelle?
I didn't mean to raise my hand. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
I did want to say, because I think it kind of builds off of what Catherine and Micah were just talking about, that we at the county, we are newly implementing like a site development program that's really specifically geared towards stormwater erosion control and our concerns around riparian and wetland and that sort of thing. And so we have started some initial conversations with Soil and Water Conservation District, but we weren't far enough along in the process at the time, and we weren't really sure how this was going to unfold. But we did get approval to start this whole new program. And so I kind of want to put the plug out, to, as you guys are looking at this and you're developing this, like I think that we are going to have a way to plug some of these things into that overall site development narrative and process that we're trying to get out there and build. Because these are the things, right? Of course, these are all attached to development projects, which we have a lot of people come into our office that are, just doing all kinds of things. So we can be like a repository for information. But specifically in this program, right, we want to start to get at on development projects, how we can better guide people, tools that we can give them, policies that we can come up with to make sure that their development project isn't impacting our streams. And so I think that could be a way that as you guys develop this, sort of keep that layer in mind, because ultimately our intent was to like sort of reach out with Soil and Water Conservation District to some of the other groups to let you guys know that we were building this program out and that we want your input, right? So that we can make it comprehensive and effective and come up with, good policies that we can implement in a regulatory fashion. To sort of, try to chip at this, these concerns and this issue from that aspect.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, I look forward to having more conversations around that. I think it's a really important conversation to have, and looking forward to seeing where that document kind of goes as it develops. Yeah. So we are now at 5 o'clock. Rochelle, were there any other items on your list that we haven't gotten to yet?
No, I believe we've gotten to them all. Really, I think the next thing was just like assisting with some of the TMDLs, but I didn't see Andrea on. And it sounds like with Dave signing off, knowing kind of what's happening, it sounds like we're a little far off from that at the moment. So that would just be like how we could plug into that as those things come up with this program, because I feel like both from the Mercury standpoint, planting trees and plants and vegetation is going to prevent sedimentation from going into the streams, which is the biggest part of that Mercury TMDL, is to preventing erosion. And then increasing shade is going to bring temperatures down.
Yeah, and encouraging people to maintain that shade. Yeah. Because the older the trees get, the more likely they are to return water and keep water flowing all year round. So cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. And as we continue to develop and our program, we'd love to be able to reach back out to all of you and get your feedback on the direction that we're heading. All right. Let me go ahead and
Thank
Good
you,
to meet you all,
everybody.
and thank you for reaching out to us.